We live life in perpetual motion, always moving forward, one foot in front of the other, until we're not, until something drags us sidewards. A life event, a feeling or a calling, a new and different reality, no longer moving forward, stuck treading water, embracing the challenge and chance to live life on the other side. The Other Side Recordings is a digital financial services and studio grade production.
I think we'll just start by saying hello and welcome.
Thank you very much.
The Other Side videos, this is going to be called.
The Other Side, I like that. There's a bit of chili peppers going on there.
Yeah, it's kind of in reference to the other side of the videos we post.
Very good.
But also stories from people who've lived on the other side of normality, let's say.
Yeah.
And maybe have a story to share. And I think you definitely fit that category.
I think so, yeah. The uncommon people.
Yeah.
100%.
And like we met in James's hospital's waiting rooms.
Yeah.
It was actually the pre-waiting rooms because of COVID. You had to wait in the corridor. What was the guy's name who used to be there?
They used to be waiting with us, or?
No, they used to let you in.
Oh, Verma, Gary.
Verma.
Yeah. Very, very nice gentleman.
Good man at managing the queue.
Of course,
which was all important. Like how quick you got in was how quick you got out.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
I know you were probably similar to me in that you would be like trying to get up as early as you could, to try and get out as quick as you could. Because you'd be there all day. And if you knew you were not needing treatment that day, you could be home and relaxing and trying to chill out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like I always think to myself, some of those days, you're going in and you feel like you're doing a shift of work because
I know
you're spending a day, you're spending 8-9 hours, and you're coming home and you're just as knackered as probably the people working there. Yeah. And all you've been doing is sitting around getting treatment. But like, say that lightly.
I know. I know. Well, I always remember being in them waiting rooms, and I always used to think it like that everyone coming through the waiting room has like a really good story to tell.
Yeah.
And the funny thing I always found about the waiting rooms is even though people were all like getting some form of treatment for something or other, it wasn't really like doom and gloomy. Like there was almost a bit of a hum or a buzz there where, I don't know, people were like, they were just there, like they did a job to do, they had their bag packed, and like, okay, I'm going in to get treatment, or like you just said, okay, I got to go in, get my bloods, get my blood pressure done, see the doctor. If there's no treatment, I'm out the door. It was very business-like.
Yeah, transactional almost in a sense. You're like, I'm on a time here and I need to get things done. 100%. Yeah, I think as well, like you said, though, when you're in that space, you're kind of looking around. When you start out, right, you really don't know where things are at. You're kind of looking around and things are a bit strange. It's so different and obviously not normal than what you're used to. And you're seeing people at different stages and you're like, what's happening to everybody? Where are people at? Am I in the same boat as all these people? Am I not? You don't know the severity of where things are looking, you know? So you can kind of tell, I think when you became a bit more mature in that space, you began to realize looking around, you're like, that's someone that's new.
Oh, you see a new.
They have that kind of look on their face, like, what am I doing? Where am I going?
Yeah.
How do I get out of here? You know, I need to get away from this space as much as you can.
There was a panic, like even there is checking in and stuff. There was and you can get it because you were there.
100%.
The hardest ones were always because when you're 16,
the younger
you
people,
get brought from Crumlin into James's, and even during COVID, they were allowed to bring a parent. They were the hardest new people to see. But other people were genuinely, I just met some really just nice people up there. But as I said, I was always curious about their stories, and you definitely fit that category. And like your story is continuing now at the end of this month, where you're going to run a marathon and you're raising money for James's Hospital Foundation, which we'll come back to, or we'll kind of work our way up. But do you want to start kind of where you feel your story starts and kind of work your way to it?
We'll kick it off. I went away to Malaysia for work for, I think it was about 3 weeks or a month, and when I got back, was just kind of kicked back into work and back into normal life in Dublin. And I work in a software company, in a telecoms company. So when I got back, I was noticing something like really weird happening where I was just feeling really kind of uneasy. I started going kind of yellowy and was like, what is happening here? I was feeling kind of sick and started going full jaundice then, and just really strange stuff was happening. And obviously, as you do, which you're not supposed to do, start Googling your symptoms, and you're like, oh God, it's this, that, and the other. And I thought right straight away, it's hepatitis. Something is after doing something to my liver. I have no clue what. And went, got bloods done, was like, yeah, your liver enzymes, your ASTs and your ALTs were all massively elevated, and your bilirubin was up, which is what gives you that kind of yellow tint. And back then, I think back then I actually went to James's, and they put me up in a room. So I was 2 weeks, I think, admitted in James's, and they tested for all different types of hepatitis, like A, B, C, all the different forms.
And did you go in through A&E, or was it like a doctor referral?
Doctor referral, yeah. So doctor referral in. Pretty sure I probably even rocked up at A&E and was then just sent up that way. I can't even remember now. Yeah. So when I got in there, then it was like, right, what can we do? Like, he doesn't fit any criteria for any of these things. What's the treatment? So it was like, we'll just put him up on a drip. He's in a private ward by himself, and let's see how he kind of recovers. Let's watch his ASTs, his ALTs, and see if his liver can sort itself out, because the liver is a really interesting kind of organ in that it regenerates, right? It can sort itself out. So, yeah, 2 weeks out of work was tough. Well, 2 weeks out of work, should I say 2 weeks admitted in the James's ward was tough. Then I eventually got out and was kind of let home to try and recover at home, and I was 2 months out of work then. So it was a really slow kind of return back to work, or what I thought was slow, right? And then was kind of getting back to normality, was trying to, feel pretty good, was trying to get back into maybe being a bit physical, play a bit of social football, five-a-sides, those types of things, and that was all going well. And I think it was probably within the same year, then I got a like a cold or flu around Christmas time. And I was noticing a few kind of like little marks and rashes around my body, and wasn't too sure what it was. And when I went in to the doc was like, your ALTs, your ASTs, and all your liver stuff looks fine, but we're looking at your blood markers here, and your platelets are starting to drop. So the markings that I was starting to have on my body were basically the petechiae was from the low platelets and the bruising kind of happening easily. And I
was that a GP as well, or had you gone back?
That was the GP at that point in time. So I was still just GP then. Then I got referred, and I was at a different hospital to get looked at, and they assumed it was like ITP, which is essentially just low platelets, right? They didn't know much more from it. So I was going back and forth from them for a bit of time. They were just in monitoring phase because the platelets weren't so low. They were kind of still in a stable position, but they weren't going into that severe space.
And just for like even Calvin's sake or someone else, how would you describe what platelets are?
Yeah, so the best way to describe platelets is they are like the kind of blocking agent that stops you from bleeding, like that kind of covers up your cuts or anything, allows the blood to kind of, I don't know if the right term is, but to coagulate around the injury and clot it and stop you bleeding out. I always think of what's that word? Hemophiliacs. People that are always bleeding out. You think of that. I presume that's one of the issues they have, is that they're obviously no platelets. So, but yeah, that monitoring phase just like kind of stayed stagnant for a while, and then we did a few. I think there was 1 or 2 biopsies we did, bone marrow biopsies that was, and we enjoy them very much so. As we were saying before, we like to use humour a lot of times for dealing with these lovely procedures. But
when did you have your first one?
The first one was 2019-ish.
And was that in a hospital?
Yeah, so that was in a hospital. That wasn't in James's though. So I remember the first one of those. Do we want to talk about the procedures and what they're like and how they're at? But I remember they were talking about before, like the bone, like trying to go into the bone. So the best way I could describe it is like someone putting a corkscrew into a wine bottle and popping it out, because that's essentially what it feels like. I have watched, I watched it after the first one. But he was saying to me, because I'm relatively young, or was relatively young at the time, under 30, that
hard bones.
Hard bones. Yeah. So I don't know what the utensil is that goes in, but it bent the utensil that it was going in, so you have to go in a second time. So the first 2 ones of those I think I didn't really like very much. No, I don't think anybody ever likes them, but they got easier for me. But I ended up getting referred back to James's then through the biopsy results and everything, and they were querying where things were going to go and what it would be. So I think I had come back into James's and had seen Dr. Flynn at that point in time, and before that, it was all the idea was that it was just ITP. It was this kind of vague, ominous thing that you know nothing about.
And are they giving you like platelet transfusions at
Not
that
at that stage, no.
Just
They were
monitoring.
holding. I think the lowest they were getting to at that stage was probably like 40,000. So they were still holding pretty well. Like, I was still working. I was still probably playing football. Like, I was still active, you know. And then it got to a point where, you know, the doctor in James has said, we think this is aplastic anemia. And when you hear that, you go, I don't know what that is. Like, and obviously they go through, well, it's bone marrow failure. And you're trying to kind of come to terms with whatever that is, because again, you don't know what that is. Like, unless you study that and you understand it and it's something you deal with very regularly, you're like, I don't know what these technical terms mean. So yeah, the aplastic anemia is basically that you're not forming blood. Your blood production is kind of not working. And I think I also had a secondary diagnosis then of PNH, which is like your immune system is killing off the blood as well. So it's like you're being hit from the angle of you're not making enough, and then the ones that are sticking around, your immune system's going, we don't like this, and it's killing those blood cells. So
and do you remember then, was it like a big event, or was it organized where they were like, okay, we're going to bring you in and like we're going to give you this diagnosis, or did it just kind of all happen?
I'm trying to remember if it was all in the first consult, because I remember the first consult was a long period of time, and I'm pretty sure I was there with my partner, and my parents weren't there that time. I don't think. It was just myself and my partner, but it was fairly obvious that we weren't aware of the severity of what was happening. We didn't understand the kind of roadmap of where things were going.
So when she said that, it didn't like hit you like a wall. You were like, okay, I don't know what this is. Or did you get a sense that it was serious?
You got the sense of the severity of it from the demeanor and the delivery. Like, you know, you can tell that this is not a good setup, but you just don't know, right? Obviously, like we said before, when you're in the waiting room, you're looking around, you're going, what way are people set up? How are these things at? Like, you know, so you're not too sure. So when you hear anemia, people automatically think like, oh, you've low iron, you need this, that, and the other. And it's like, no, aplastic anemia is something very different. Whereas if someone tells you leukemia, straight away, you know, blood cancer, you're like, that's not good. So you're kind of still trying to figure out where things are at. So I'd say I did know that it was as severe as it was, but I don't think it fully hit me at that point in time.
Had any of your like pre-research as such pointed you in that direction?
No, because that illness is so rare and so kind of outside the bounds of normal purview, let's say. It's like, I've never heard of this, I don't know what it is, I don't know what it's all about. And
that's why no one would have pre-jumped to that conclusion.
Yeah, you wouldn't. Like, I don't know how many people are hit with that disease each year, but like, it's not something you hear about a lot. Now, obviously, it's like today now when I see it almost everywhere in different things. I've heard of it in Chernobyl, I've heard of it in Grey's Anatomy, I hear it in different places, but it's like the usual thing. If you buy a car, you start seeing that car everywhere because you're used to it now and you're aware of it. So it's just something that I never retained information of. Obviously, it was never fully front and center.
Have you met anyone else?
That's a really good point. So the strangeness is the times, I think when I was in with you, there was two other folks in there at the same time that had the same illness as me. Two men, one older and one younger. And the older gentleman he was 6 months ahead of me, so I think he was true transplant at that point in time.
Right.
And then a gentleman younger than me, and he was starting the first line of treatment at the same time I was. So the strangeness is that one of them is relatively close to me. Like, he lives in Dublin, fairly close enough, like 5-10 minute drive away.
Strange.
Which is nuts, because like just the opportunity of us both being that close to each other is quite...
It does help though, doesn't it?
So yeah, it was amazing to have those kind of contacts. Now, obviously, I went to the older gentleman a lot more frequently. I say older, he's literally not that older than me, and the younger is not that younger. But there's only two ways to describe, you know. But it's great to have a resource. And I even went back and forth to yourself, Paul, for a lot of things. Like, I was asking questions. So I think it's just that sometimes the treatment might differ based on,
of course,
you know.
Yeah.
You're never really too sure, but like when I was in for my first line of treatment, we could talk about the first line of treatment is ATG treatment. So that one is horse ATG, which is they basically put I think it's like some kind of human cells into a horse, and it generates up these antibodies that then you put back into your own system, and I think it basically restarts your kind of immune system, or it stops your immune system from killing off your cells.
Come up with this stuff.
The weirdness, yeah. How do you know? Oh yeah, we'll stick this into a horse and
Sounds
then take out the antibody and what's happening? But that was the first line of treatment, and the idea of that is obviously it stops the T cells from attacking your blood cells, and hopefully your body allows your blood cells count to come back up, and then see how your body kind of does after that. So that treatment is not anywhere near as intense, and it's obviously it gives you like a first line of we'll give this a go, and if this works, happy days. So that treatment was like, I think 2 weeks admitted.
Oh, you were admitted again?
But, so that was the first admission that I had. But the awkwardness of all of this stuff was, and I might be getting my timelines a bit mixed up here, but COVID was kicking off all around this point in time. So the question of proceeding with treatment was coming up because it was, but what's COVID and what are we going to do with COVID and all the areas of this. So I think I was admitted and then sent home like almost that day because they didn't want to proceed to see what was happening with COVID. So it was like, I suppose when you're working with the unknown, it's hard enough to see where things are going to go. If you're going to make someone immunocompromised in the next few months, it's like, what do you do?
And how soon after you were kind of told what the diagnosis was, were you to start treatment? Like, did they just send you home and say, we'll get back in touch with you, or what?
You had to reach a certain range, I'm pretty sure, before treatment would start. So the monitoring phase, it's very different than an acute illness in that you have to hit all three criteria. So I'm pretty sure my bone marrow biopsy hit the criteria for the cellular count in my bone marrow was too low and it was replaced by fats. There was the platelets, I think, which was another one, and then maybe it was neutrophils on the third one. I can't really remember, but until they reached a certain point in time, that I think that's the point when you go, right, it's severe and it's something that needs to be kind of treated straight away. But I think at the whole time you're trying to figure out and monitor and figure out timelines and all that stuff as well with the chronic illness of how you can, when's the right time to jump in and intervene, because if it can sort itself out or your body can figure things out, then that'd be better, right? So,
and how hard was it during that time? Like, did you just feel like it was a really difficult...
Energy levels are just mental, or the whole lot physical, everything. So like the difference is that when it's something that's so gradual over time, your concept of baseline normal is different, right? So you're slowly but surely getting lesser and lesser in energy, in mental state and everything. So you're just starting to degrade slowly over time. So you don't really recognize how bad it's becoming. But it because everything hit with COVID at the same time, and then I was like cocooning and I was still living at my parents' house. I couldn't see my partner. I couldn't go do anything, go anywhere. I was like locked in the house, and you literally felt like you were kind of imprisoned. That took a massive toll mentally on me, first and foremost. So it was like, I can't go anywhere and do anything. And obviously at that stage, I think I was out of work at that stage, just before the COVID stuff had all kicked off. So I was still working. COVID stuff had kicked off, and I was supposed to be going for my first treatment. And then that obviously all paused with COVID. So I was like stuck in limbo, not knowing, am I going to get sorted? What's going to happen? So energy levels were low. They were getting lower, but they weren't as low as the lowest that they could get to, right? So you're still able to kind of mosey about and do bits and pieces. But at that stage, that was back in lockdown phase when like people would be going for walks in like their family bubbles, and like you couldn't look at people or else you were gonna pick up an illness. It was like,
it was really scary.
It was a scary time.
Yeah.
And so a lot of fear maybe that people would have had back then was like, oh, if I get this and I'm in an unhealthy situation, it's going to take me out or it's going to do whatever. And it's like, you can't control that stuff, right? So you just got to try and deal with what you can do at that point in time.
That was a real talk when it was 100%. New. When you're on all that medication, you had to be like, take it really seriously.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but I think I had a few little kind of coping mechanisms that I dealt with. I did a good bit of journaling back then, to try and deal with it. Now, like, did it help? Ultimately, it probably did a bit, but it was just like I just wanted to get things going and get the show on the road with the treatment and see where things were at. So
the waiting was probably hard.
The waiting was the worst part for it, right? So, and because like you want to get back. I don't know yourself, but for myself, I feel like my utility as a man is to work and provide and do all those types of things and be useful, like, to some degree, So I just wanted to get back to being able to do something at all. It could have been anything. So, but the first line of treatment, getting into that, like that was kind of like a peek into what treatment would be like. The first time taking the likes of cyclosporin, so the immunosuppressant drug, dirty drug. Like, and the side effects that come with that and all that. But the first time taking that, I remember just, puking it all straight back up.
So you had to take that in the waiting room because you couldn't take that before you got your bloods done, and you'd know because you could hear the rattle of the file and then you could smell it.
So the first time I took that, I took the tablet form, and obviously everyone says the smell of it and the way it's going to break down and all that kind of stuff. But the first time I took it, I was terrible at taking tablets at the start, right? So I had to like almost do one by one. And they're big tablets then when you start to get to the cyclo. So when I was taking that, I couldn't. So I had to I went to the oral version, like literally like you put it in a little glass syringe and you take it that way. And I was like, this is ideal because then you don't have to even be worrying about, how many mg you're taking. You can just put it into the syringe and pour it into a drink and drink it that way. So that was ideal for that, and it was easier to get down and everything else. But like that was tough enough, but I thought at a point in time it looked like that first line of treatment with the cyclosporin and eltrombopag, which is then another drug that they give you to try and bring your platelets up. It looked like at a point in time that was going to work. So I think I had a partial response about 3 months in.
Right.
And we thought like, okay, maybe then this is going to hold up. So I wasn't getting transfusions or anything at that point in time. The body was still kind of able to cope and hold itself together. But then as time went on, the trend never peaked back up. It kept going down and down and down. So it got to a point where it was like, right, we're going to have to go with the bone marrow transplant, the stem cell transplant. We've got to figure out if we've got a match. I had one sibling, a sister, and she wasn't a match, unfortunately. So they had to go to the bone marrow registry to see if there's any match. So, you're trying to figure out then, right, what timelines are like and how you can get that whole thing set up and when that's going to be executed as a plan of action for treatment,
And you'd known people at that stage who'd had transplants. Was that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think the people who have gone through it are always trying to suss out the person that's asking the questions to see how much they can take information-wise and tell them, is it going to be easy, is it going to be hard? Like, the one thing I've noticed a lot of is everybody has totally different ways that they're dealing with stuff and how even they take treatments. So a treatment that could be really difficult for you could be really easy for me. Something that could be really easy for me could be really difficult for you. So it's like, if I said to you, oh, that's a breeze, and you go to it and you find it impossible, it's like, it's really hard to gauge for each individual. So, but I think at that stage I had met yourself, and I had probably only one other that I was speaking to about transplant, and I think you guys both put me on the kind of route that, like, it'll be tough, it'll be difficult, but it's going to be worth it when you come out the other end, because you're going to have some sense of normalcy in life back, that you can live and you can do stuff. So, but it's each kind of milestone and each part. Like, when you're asking those questions, I'm not like, give me the list of all the things you've had to deal with. It's like a very, how is the whole format and situation? And you're like, yes. You're like, I don't know how much I can disclose here and how much I can tell, but like,
so I felt like it was the worst kept secret. Like,
oh really? Okay.
I didn't I'd been told and prepped that it was really difficult.
Yeah.
And it kind of just went, and then when you're in it, I was like, oh God,
this is very different.
This is really difficult.
I remember I was told by the consultant that it was going to be like put in a dishwasher or a washing machine or something, and I'm like, to me that's a really good analogy, because if you're in a washing machine and this thing's flipping upside down and you can't tell what way's up and what way's down, and you're going, there's probably only 5 minutes of this left. There's not, like, you know what I mean, you don't know how much time it is or isn't for you in that space. So whenever I think of that, I think of like, it really is an unknown. You're going to be toyed with, like, and you're not going to know much. So,
and when Dave mentioned to you then that, okay, your treatment has come this far, we think the best course of action, was that like being diagnosed again, or was it a sense of relief, or were you like, oh, for God's sake, or what? How did you react to that?
I think because it was such a like kind of build up after the first treatment and seeing that wasn't going anywhere, because then it got to the point where I was needing transfusions, and a lot of transfusions, it was like, you can't go on like this, like your body's not going to tolerate it and we're going to have to do something. So it was like, you're kind of a little bit like, oh no, I have to go to the big plan, but then at the same time you're like, I'm going to hopefully get better at the end of it. So it's like a mixed feeling. You're kind of, even when I went to the consultation then with my partner, one of her parents and my parent, like, you're aware. I think at that stage I was just raring to go. you're reading the documents of how everything can go wrong, and you're just like, I'm just going to try and hit this thing head on.
It's a hard thing to sign, that document, isn't it?
It is, but I think the opposite is probably
you can't,
like, hard as well. Like, I don't want to say, like, your fight to want to just kicks in, you know. You just say to yourself, I'm going to do this for whatever it takes, and however much leaves behind, I'm going to go for it. Like, so I don't even think at that stage, but I was reading an awful lot of books to try and understand human behavior and how I was going to try and cope with it and deal with it. And books are never going to help you for how you're going to actually have to deal with that thing. You can do all the theory you want, but till you get into practical space, it's a totally different kettle of fish. Like,
and how long then was the build up between them telling you to you actually getting ready for the transplant?
I think it was like I can't remember if it was a few months or if it was less. I know that they had obviously to order in the bone marrow from wherever it was coming, and all the alignment of that had to happen, and it had to be done at a the right time. I think the bone marrow had to come over fresh because it couldn't be frozen, all of this kind of stuff. So at that stage, I'm pretty sure I was just locked in. I was like, I'm just going to enjoy the few weeks I have with my family, and then see where things go from there afterwards. You know, it was like, enjoy the kind of calmness before the storm that would kick in. And then obviously as soon as I was kind of getting back into going in there, it's like you're getting kind of G'd up. You're feeling, it's a really strange one, right? So you're getting totally pumped up and G'd up for something, and you don't do anything. You just sit there and you just lie there for everything to come to you and to
I couldn't wait to go in.
Yeah,
I was so ready. Like, now I had like 3 weeks in between, and
your timeline was a lot more acute than mine, right?
Oh, so, no, just like
instant.
Yeah, like I got diagnosed. Like, I don't know if it was a proper diagnosis or a pre-diagnosis in one of the hospitals down here, where a guy just came in because I was looking to go home. I was going to sign myself out, and he was I don't remember much of the actual chat. I remember glimpses of it, but essentially he was like, oh, we've looked at your blood and you have leukemia, and you won't be going home now, or you won't be going home for a long time.
Yeah.
And then I got transferred in ambulance up to James's. They wouldn't even let me go home or drive up. And it was really weird, because I just walked into the hospital, and then a guy came to pick us up, but he like put me in a wheelchair, and I was like, man, I think I can walk.
I can go to it, yeah.
And he was like, no,
policy.
I'm going to need you to get in.
Policy for them to bring you up on that format.
And it was really weird. Then in the ambulance, he was like, oh yeah, I had, that was the first time I heard about transplant. He was like, oh, I had leukemia and I had transplant 5 years ago. I was like, this is really weird.
Yeah.
And he had actually, I already forgot about that now, but he was like, yeah, one of the things during the treatment is a lot of isolation. I only remember that now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was straight in then, and it was kind of like one after the other, and they knew pretty soon they were going for a transplant. Yeah. But by the time I got to it, like you, I was kind of built myself up. I was like, right, I don't know what I'm going for,
but I'm doing it.
I'm ready to go. I want this done now.
100%. So like, I think, so let's go into kind of that build up, that conditioning week for your treatment. You're like, the very beginning, you're like, look, let's do this. And then, I don't know about yourself, but I had the 5 days of chemotherapy, and that's a interesting space, because at first I thought like nothing was really happening, right? Because it's not an instant thing. It's something that slowly starts to onset. And then obviously a day of radiation, and then I can't remember if I had a break day in between and then the transplant day. But all of that was relatively, I think, I don't want to say smooth, but I think it was relatively according to plan. And then obviously it all kicks off after that. It's just like the most difficult experience that you're ever going to have to put yourself through. But there's an awful lot of learning, and there's an awful lot of understanding that your body is able to tolerate so much. Like, throughout all the bit of time when you're not well and you're prone to infections, and you're going in and out constantly, because you can't fight off infections, and your body's just trying to soldier on and push through. That when you get in that situation, you're dealing with all these things that are coming at you. It's like, my mindset was, I couldn't see anything past a certain point in time. I could only focus on small increments of time and try and get through each part like that, and just try and trudge through and see where things are at. But like, you're forgetting all the parts where, like, you know, you're getting your Hickman line in and all those things. You're getting all those bits and pieces done. Like, there's so much build up to it. There's all your pre-tests to make sure that your heart's okay, your lungs, teeth, that everything. You're doing all those tests to make sure everything's okay and try and get everything aligned. So it's like, it's a massive build up, and it's a massive amount of kind of pressure that you're having. So then when you're in the treatment and you're going through that, you're like, this is tough. And each day was so tough and so difficult.
What timeline was it you got it? What year and month and stuff?
So the transplant.
Yeah.
Transplant is probably just over 3 years ago now at this stage. It was June, July. So
2021 was it?
July was 2021, yeah.
And was COVID still a thing?
So COVID was a thing. So it was like we couldn't really have people coming in and out and visiting and whatnot. So I think my partner came in only a handful of times, and like that was really, really tough in a sense, because obviously they'd seen you beforehand going in kind of relatively, I don't want to say okay, but you know what I mean, they had seen you at a certain baseline, and now they were seeing you and you were dealing with all of the treatment, and you're wearing it. You're wearing your treatment on your body. So like they recognize that straight away. That's another point I kind of want to make out, is that a lot of people think that when you're going through treatment that it's just you, the individual, that's suffering. Like my partner and my family and my friends and everybody around me were all being hindered by this thing massively, right? They were my support system, and they had so much that they had to deal with throughout all of that time, that it was such a difficult period of time for them, because they can't do anything, right? And they just want to try and help as much as they possibly can throughout the whole experience or throughout the whole situation to just get you out the other end. So that's something that I always recognize now, is that when something's happening, the secondary people around, they are taking a massive hit as well, because they're having to deal with everything else that's, you know, the shortfall of what comes out of it.
They're almost invisible as well. I always felt like, I always thought that with everyone around, like everyone comes in and checks on how you are, and are you okay, and what happened this, and but like I used to always think that with Sarah, like she had to have the stress of that. She still had to be a parent. She was almost my carer. She was running a house. She was running, and
100%, yeah.
Like in a way, it's nearly harder to, because I'd always say I'd rather be the one who's going through like the treatment or the pain rather than watch someone else.
Yeah.
But to deal with watching someone carry on in life, keep the whole household going, keep everything running, and then you're almost just the person on the side. So I completely agree with you. Like support for everyone else affected is often overlooked.
Exactly. It does. It takes a hit in them, takes a hit in their confidence, takes it everything. And then obviously you're sitting there watching it as the person that's gone through it, and you can't do anything. You cannot help in any way, shape or form. You just have to focus on yourself. So, like, I know throughout the entire transplant process then of when I was starting to get better, was that I had like a really weird period of time where obviously when I was going through my engraftment point in time, I was having like my body being really, really strange and act really, really weird, and my skin getting really strange flare-ups, like mad looking bruises and mad things setting in, and not being able to eat then because of the mucositis, and my kind of mouth all messed up, and obviously even when you're on the cyclosporin, your gums start to grow down over your teeth and all of that type of stuff happening. So trying to just go through each day of all of that stuff happening is hard enough. And then obviously, like we're talking about, your hair falling out and all of that kind of stuff happening. It's a really weird thing to think you know yourself, see all this stuff happening, and then not recognize what you are and who you are and what you stand for and what your values are, because you're used to seeing yourself in a certain light. So it took a toll on me in that space. But my whole drive then was just to try and get back to normalcy and get back to my partner, and like that was my main drive, was that I just wanted to be around and appreciate any amount of time that I was going to have after that. So you become kind of emboldened in that cause. But then at that stage, I think I was at like a really high dose levels of steroids, and I think my white blood cells were starting to come up at that point in time, so they knew that, you know what I mean, it was starting to work. And then you're obviously looking at a point in time where you're like, right, can I go home? Has he gotten through all the hard issues that you've kind of hit on, and high blood pressure, and you know, not being able to breathe from certain points of time because, you know, your body's withholding water, and you're having to take diuretics to, like, you know what I mean, rinse it all out. All the mad stuff that's happening in between there. It's like, right, I finally think I'm getting to the end of it and where things are at. And this is where my story as well changes and goes a bit weird, because I ended up getting psychosis. And I ended up getting psychosis because what seemed to be was that I was having such a high dose of steroids that I was getting like misfirings of dopamine in my head. So I basically got out of the hospital after the transplant, was home for a day or 2 days, slept very little in those days because you're probably the same, right? When you get out, everything is moving so fast. Everything is so kind of not strange but different than what you remembered it to be as. It feels like a new sense of the world and of everything around you. My mind couldn't switch off. So I remember one of the nights, I think I probably didn't sleep. I feel like I was just staring at the ceiling the whole night, being like, I'm home, I'm in my house. And I was in my house now, the house with my partner this time now. And I was like, I can't switch off. I'm totally like just on. I can't turn anything off. I can't switch off. I can't. So I ended up like waking up one of the mornings, then getting sick, and then my mind just going completely haywire. And we brought me back into the hospital for like, what do you do? Someone that's immunocompromised and now their mind seems to be going very strange. So we took me in. Again, I'm running around like a maniac because I don't know what's going on with my body. Like, I don't know what's happening.
Can you recall that?
I recall an awful lot of it. So it's a really strange scenario where I remember a lot of stuff that was happening. I remember having like really strange kind of tendencies, like OCD tendencies, where it was like I needed certain things to be in a certain way. I needed to be doing things like in repetition, and they had to be like the direct number of like 4 times I have to do this. And like, I'm not that type of person. I wouldn't be that type of person, but I was just in a totally different mind state than I've ever been. And when all that stuff was happening, then I remember they were bringing in the psych team trying to understand what's going on, right, and try and put me on some medication to chill me out. And they're trying to diagnose me, and they're asking me questions, and I don't know what year it is. I'm saying it's 2012, 2013. They're asking me who's the president. I'm like, Mary McAleese. It's like, I don't even know what hospital I'm in. It's a really, really strange scenario and setup. So essentially what they figured out over like time as it was going on was that I was on such high doses of the steroids that was making the dopamine misfire in my brain, and I was having these really weird associations with things that are not the right way, right? So you see something, I don't know, you see a Ferrari and you go, oh, look, a Ferrari, and let's say you're into cars, you get kind of like amplified from that. I'd like look at a blade of grass and just get a misfire, and I'd be like, that blade of grass is amazing. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, why am I getting this sensation kick in and take over? So I was obviously in the ward. They're trying to look after me and see where things are at. And like, even time itself was going in weird directions. One moment I'd be sitting there and I'd be watching the TV, and like with no split change, all of a sudden I'm like butter and toast. I'm like, what? When did I go from there to that? And then even stuff like in the morning, they'd come in and bring food to you, and you're looking at a tray full of food, and you're like, what do I do with this tea bag? What do I do with the tea? What do I do with this fork? Trying to like remember stuff, and I'm like, why is my mind doing this? Like, what's happening? So what I think was happening in that space, and from all the stuff that I've read, was that like my conscious self was starting to kind of drift back, and my unconscious was getting too strong, that it flipped into the kind of control, which would put you as like your base animalistic self, right? When you get a gut feeling, you're like, oh, what was that all about? That's like innate in you. You don't conjure that up. It's just there. So like, I feel like that part of the sense of self took over and was just driving and was just trying to crack forward.
Is that in a way like a protection mechanism?
100%. Yeah.
So it's like your body's like, this is too much. I'm just going to reverse to autopilot type.
Exactly. Full autopilot. But the weirdness is that like, I think I was coping fairly well with my conscious self as everything was going on. Obviously it was difficult, but the weirdness was when obviously I was getting these misfirings, and that was totally switching things off. So when they began to taper me off of the steroids, then I started to come back to myself. So really, really strange, bizarre and weird scenario to be in, but I was so happy to get out of that space, and because it's difficult to deal with somebody who doesn't know what's going on and where they are, and you're constantly getting caught into then fight, flight, or freeze. And once or twice I was getting into flight, and I was just trying to get out of there and just run free.
The hospital?
Yeah, and it's like, I'm an immunocompromised person. Like,
I do that all the time. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
I have notes on me on file.
To not do it. I'm sure it happens to a lot of people. But like, I don't think I was ever getting like the fight format. But like, I know for a fact I was like freezing a lot of time and just freezing up. And I would say it was a nightmare for my partner as well, because she was trying to, like you said before, she was trying to work and hold everything down, and we've animals at home and all that kind of stuff. So she was trying to keep all that contained. But then here's me basically causing havoc and ringing her, being like, I don't know what the hell's going on with me. Like, can you get here now? And it's like, I've got a 9-to-5 job. Like, I can't do that. Like, so you're putting stress on people, but you don't know. Like, you're not in the right mind. They're aware of everything that's going on around you. So, it was nice to get out of that space and through that as well, and then kind of come back to the sense of normalcy in myself and understand when my emotions were coming back, because I was coming off all the drugs that they were putting me on to try and calm me down. But like, you really don't know what's happening on the mental health side of things as well. So I think I've said to you before that I was doing the journaling. Like, I would do journaling when I would be going in and out for admissions and whatnot, to try and calm myself down, to be like, only try and manage the stuff that you're able to manage and control, you can control, and anything outside of that is not within your control. You've just got to leave it be and live with what you can handle. So lots of reading of different books, lots of Stoicism books, lots of I read some David Goggins books as well, and like you're picking up bits and pieces from each bit of literature you're reading and trying to understand coping mechanisms. So like, I think I had a lot of the tools to try and understand, to push through these things, but sometimes if stuff's not happening right neurotransmitter wise or neurochemically upstairs, then it's going to misfire and it's going to kick things off. So it was just good that they knew that that's what it was, and that I was going to come out of it, or when we took me off of the steroids that were making it happen, that I came back to normalcy. Because very, very strange scenario and point in time. I feel like it gives me a much better appreciation for people that are maybe schizophrenics living today and having to live through that every single day. Like, you know what I mean? If that's their baseline, that's a really, really tough existence to try and understand and push through.
But to do that on top of feeling sick, it's all consuming. Like,
so like, the funny part, like you're saying, is through all that, you're still physically not well. Like, so
really recent after a transplant.
Yeah. So I think even when I was receiving transplant, right, my whole mindset was, I'm kind of open to what I'm kind of taking and what I'm receiving is something that is part of somebody that they've given up a part of themselves. Like, the altruism that individual has to give up that part is unbelievable. Like, I still can't get my head around fully how people are able to do that type of thing for somebody else, particularly if they don't know them. Like, it's an unbelievable act of courage on their behalf. But to be able to accept that kind of in the body, in the mind, and in spirit, in all aspects, because I don't know if you felt the same, but the fear of rejection is also always there, that you'll go through this treatment and then your body will reject it and push it aside, and you'll get a really tough graft versus host disease kind of kick in, where your bone marrow is fighting the donor's bone marrow, and you're trying to, you're either getting gut issues or stomach issues, or your blood numbers aren't coming up and all that type of stuff. So my whole thought process there was like, try and be open to receive what's to come, because this thing ultimately has to work. Like, so
I think because the transplant itself is almost a non-issue, it's just another transfusion, which if someone doesn't know what that is, it's essentially just a drip into your arm. It's just a bag of blood, essentially, that's drip fed into your arm. So sometimes when you think of a transplant, you think of someone giving another organ to another person, but because ours is essentially someone's immune system, or what could become an immune system, is put into your blood, it's just a bag of blood. So the build up to it, as you said, the week of conditioning is, well, I found it really difficult, and then the transplant itself is a real non-event, but then it's afterwards. And sometimes I felt like going, Jesus, it was only a transfusion. Like, why am I so sick? Like, but really, when you think about what they've done beforehand, and then what they're putting into your body, it is
it's a full change. You're changing in your entirety of what you are as, like, your makeup is something different, right? So like, you're right though, that the thought of it just being a transfusion, like, a lot of people, when they ask me, they said, and how's the surgery? And it's like, we know it's a procedure because we've been through it, but like you said, they'll just think of a body part transplant that's passed through, and that's a surgery. You cut open, you do whatever. So it is unbelievable what they do and what they're able to do. And
you almost think the most dangerous part of it is doing the transplant, because that's probably the case for a lot of organ donors. It's the surgery to get from.
Yeah.
I felt the hard part, or the dangerous part, was weeks after you've had.
Yeah.
Well, I always remember the day after I got transplant was one of the tougher days I ever had.
Okay.
I had just one of the world's worst headache, and I remember one of the nurses coming in, and she was saying, they were actually kind of talk about bringing in someone to talk to, and they were like, the day after is like a massive just drop off a ledge where you expect everything to be different, and in fact you more than likely feel really bad the next day. And she was like, that's really normal. But even stuff like that was good expected. To hear. I was like, I thought I was dying of a brain tumor the next day.
No, it's good to know that things are going to be shit. Like, the one thing that I know a lot of people, particularly my support group and my partner, would always say, like, when you're going through that stuff, you hated the stuff like, oh, that's terrible or whatever. When people were like, that's really shit, I'm like, we hate this. It's like, it's nice when you hear people speaking kind of open and candidly about stuff, because like, it is raw. It is something that you're dealing with. It is something where you're like, this is the worst. I don't want to be having to go through this. And people shouldn't have to go through this, but people have to. And people, like you said, like the younger people coming in who really can't understand it. It's like, it's not fair. It's not something that people should have to go through. So I think even at a point I was like, I don't want this thing to be something I feel victimized by, right? It's something that I don't want to feel like, oh, poor me. I want to try and push through it, and I want to try and take it on. That's why I was saying before, I feel like I had a lot of the utensils to try and take this thing on. And like you saying before earlier, people might be coming in to talk to you because of your mind state and where things are at. Like 100%. Like, you do need support. You do need to be able to talk to people about different things, about what's happening, about the process is. Ultimately, though, you can do all the preparation for this stuff and talk it through, but when you're in it, it's very different, So, like, I would try and use, you talking about the day post-transplant, like the few times that I was having really, really tough times and having the reactions with my body where stuff was kicking off and infections are kicking in, and they're just going through different lists of antibiotics to try and get you through and see which one works. It's like, well, we're on our third one now. Let's see how that kicks off. It's like, you're melting. Like, you feel like you're melting from the inside out, and your body's not reacting how it's supposed to, and it's just letting you kind of fall apart. It's nice to just be able to put yourself in a space that you're able to push through it. So I would use like the David Goggins tool that he has at a cookie jar, and I don't know if you've heard of this, but you maybe have used some of these tools yourself when you're going through treatment. Is that you pull a memory out of the cookie jar, and the memory is something that is dear to you and something that you really, really love or enjoy, or something that gives you solace, and you think about that space and you put yourself there as you're trying to deal with the pain that you're going through. And this is something that I kind of think now when I'm doing the marathon for St. James Hospital, I keep thinking to myself, you don't realize how much you have in you and what you're able to endure and what your body's able to endure. You keep thinking to yourself, I'm at the lowest point. It can't get any lower. It's like, you've no idea how low it can get. It can just keep going low and low and low. And you're like, where's bedrock? It's like, there is no bedrock. It just keeps going down. So when you're down at those low levels, you're like, you don't really appreciate what your body is able to do, what your mind's able to do, how resilient we are as humans and as a species and support group and everything around it. It's like, you can put yourself through so much more. So when it came to even to the point of me running the marathon, it's like, I'd even run. I don't do running. Like, I played a bit of football at my younger years, and I think probably the longest run I would have done would have been maybe like a 10K, just solid running. So I was like, right, let's try and take on something that will put me in that space where my mind is like, this is terrible. I don't like this. Because adversity is what kind of grows you, right? You put yourself in space where you don't like things because it's something for you to overcome. The obstacle is the way. Like, you push through it. So I think it's interesting to try and take things on that you're not really comfortable with, you're not able to do, because that's how you can grow. And that's probably even yourself doing these videos now, where it's like, it's an area you don't know, it's a domain you don't know. Give it a go and try it out and see where things are at and begin to grow. Learn some knowledge or network or anything of what it is. You're picking up bits and pieces. So,
but it's funny. One of the things you said there about the human mind. I remember, I don't know if I read something or seen something about like that Navy SEAL mentality, and it's talking about that. It's like they can go to a space in their mind where most people can't go, and that's when I always say about looking around the waiting room, and I always think of these people, and I go like, you've got 16-year-old kids, or you've got elderly, men or women, or just people at all stages in their life, and I look at all of them and I'm like, I know what you're going through, and you're going to this place that is considered like this really like strength of mind place, and they just walk around and they don't make a deal of it. And that's why I always think people just and that's part of like when I said people like what you've gone through have a story, like you've experienced another side of living, and I think it changes people. I don't want to speak on everyone's behalf, for the better. It gives you just a different view or perspective on life and stuff, because I think 100%. You've gone to these different places, and
there is this kind of relativism that kicks in though, right? Where when you're in this space, like you're worrying about survival and where things are going to go and how much of it's going to take, and if you're going to have other illnesses and all this kind of stuff's kicking off. But then, like, when I eventually started getting back to work and the mundaneness of life, and then I'm like complaining about normal things, it's like, I should be allowed to complain about normal things, that kind of way. A lot of times I'll be talking to people and they say, you're talking about whatever the tough thing is that you went through, and then someone else is like, I broke my leg, like, but I shouldn't be complaining. And it's like, no, complain, like it's something crap that you have to deal with. It's like, if it happened to me now, I'd complain. Like, I'm not going to sit here and go, well, it's not as bad as this other thing. It's like, it's all relative to people. Like,
that's exactly the statement. I got that a lot of time. Go, I shouldn't say this, but everyone's circumstances is relative to your other, and it's not comparable. 100%. You don't have to say, oh well, I had this really bad situation, but it's not as bad as it doesn't have to.
It doesn't work. Yeah. So I think one thing I used to do would be, and I try and do this with like admissions that I would have where I'd spike a temp. I would fight to try and stay home as much as I could, because I didn't want to go in, and you were probably the same. I don't know if most patients are the same, but I would fight as much as I could to try and stay home, and like it'd get to the point where I know I wouldn't be drinking water, and I'd just be trying to hold on, and then it's like, right, no, you're not well. You have to go in, and your support system is there, and your partner, whoever else, is like, we want you to get better, so you have to go in. And you're trying to then put yourself through the process of like, right, I have to go in, here's the steps I need to go through, and here's the thing. But it's like, what I would always try and do is not to ruminate and hit myself over the head with the same thing multiple times. So if I had to go in, I'd have my emotional outburst and say, this is how I feel, this is whatever, to allow myself to feel what I needed to feel. But then once it was done, I'd put it to bed, and I'd say, right, that's done. You're allowed to feel how you should feel, but now we've got to kind of move on from it and deal with it, and like logically understand where things are going. So like, I think I remember one of the times, it was like my 5th or 6th admission, I had some mad big like boil on my cheek or something, or like a spot that had like got fully infected and was like massively sticking out. And I was like really, really down on myself going into one of the wards, and I was like, I don't want to be here, I don't be whatever. And I was noticing that like everything was emotional, right? It was all me, how I'm feeling, all this type of stuff. And I was like, I'd seen some of this journaling from the Stoics perspective as well, and it was like, just write down what's happening, not how you feel about it, but what's happening, what has happened before, and what'll kind of happen in the future. And it was like, I've been admitted like 5 times before to these wards. Every single time the doctors have treated me and I've been out and I've been okay. It's like, remove the element of emotion if the emotion is becoming too much for yourself, and just see things kind of plainly. And in doing so, it was like, it kind of gave me a sense of solace. It was like, I think I'm going to be okay. Like, I'm going to be fine throughout all this. So you pick up different coping mechanisms to try and deal with these things. Like, and it could be something as terrible as having to go through a transplant. It could be something as small as you don't like public speaking and you've got to try and put yourself through something. It's like, I always think that those areas where you're putting yourself in some line of adversity for you is an area of growth that you need to kind of pick things up and push on. So an interesting point I just want to push back to is I remember back in the day I used to love watching Louis Theroux, all the documentary series he does do, and I think I'd watched like every single episode and loved watching them all. And I got to one, and the one that I really struggled with was an episode of people that were like terminally ill, of him going and interviewing them and talking to the families and talking to their partners and just different things. And I think I got like 10 minutes in and I just couldn't watch it. I was like, I can't put myself through this. And this is before all my treatment. And now when I think about it, I'm like, that's an area of something I couldn't look at. Like, I was not able to understand and take in and not normalize, but absorb, you know? And then it's like, that's an area of growth. So now when I'm thinking about anything, if you're seeing something as difficult or an area where you don't like things, go for it. See how you get on. You might surprise yourself how much you end up growing and picking up stuff and, you know what I mean, getting into a space of liking some of the parts that you don't like to have to deal with because you're beginning to grow, you know, overcoming something, learning something in a different area, and becoming a bit humbled at the same time as well, because, you know, I think we all like to stay in our domain and areas of comfort and sit there and just kind of stagnate and never grow in any essence. Whereas now I'm like, I want to grow as much as I can. I want to live the best life I can. I want to have the best time with my partner. I want everything I can get. So why would I not throw myself at it all?
Do you feel freer now? Just to be like, I'm just gonna throw myself into anything and everything.
Yeah, I've read an awful lot of books around like free will and like whether it's there or not, or whether your path is predestined ahead of time. So I don't know. I like the arguments for both angles and where things go. I do feel freer in essence. I still feel obviously we're tethered to our environment and our past and everything that's presented in front of us, but I'd say I would. My mindset is different than how it was before.
Clearer?
You know? I don't know if I'd say clearer. More so that I've probably been more confidence in pushing myself into the unknown. You know, when you're talking about treatment and you're talking about illnesses, a lot of times we're sitting in areas where we don't know what's happening. There's a lot of unknowns. I used to always say this illness is like having an anvil over your head and not knowing when it's going to fall. So you're like, uncertainty is like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? That's why when I cut back to, you know, the stoicism dichotomy of control, is it something I can do right now to deal with the situation? Yes, do it. Is it something I have no control over? I'm not going to worry about it because I can't, you know? So I think I'm probably more so understanding of myself. Not that I fully know myself and what I'm all about and where things are going, but I understand so much more about myself and decisions and why people make decisions and have, you know, their politics are totally different and why they behave the way they behave. Like, there's just been so much I've read from books. There's so many different angles and human behavior and psychology and sociology, all of that stuff that I've just wanted to learn about and absorb to understand why we are the way that we are. So
do you plan ahead now, or do you just like, okay, I'm going to make, this is what I'm going to do in the moment?
Yeah. I'd say it's probably a bit of a mix, right? It's like you've got to plan certain things ahead as much as you can, but there's obviously going to be a lot of unknowns that you don't know how to deal with. So, and I know in a lot of things that I'm going to be going towards in the future, there's going to be unknowns, there's going to be obstacles, but I think that's probably part of the journey for you to overcome all these things. So I'd say, yeah, I do. Obviously, the marathon, I wanted to just throw myself at something new. So I had been out of transplant, was back to work, was back to kind of getting back into the swing of things, and my job was fairly sedentary. I'm at a desk 8 hours in the day. I'm sleeping 8 hours of the day like everyone should be, and then for the last 8 hours of the day, what am I doing? Like watching Netflix, playing video games. It's like I'm not doing anything. Like I'm not giving any love back to my body for what it's provided to me. So I was like, I'm gonna cut out all of the video games, and any time that I want to go and play any of these games, I'm just going to go to the gym or I'm going to do something physical. And so that slowly began to kind of build up, and I was going maybe twice a week at the start with my partner, who's been going for a lot longer than I have. And then we were building up maybe to 3 times a week, 4 times a week, and it just started to grow. And we were doing like strength and conditioning training, and I've never really been a big built strong individual. I've always been kind of a cardio based person, so I really enjoyed that space. And I was doing that, and I kept saying to myself, I wonder, could I take on anything any bigger? So I wanted to go and try and do a little bit of running. And I remember I tried a few bits of running even post transplant, and I think it was like 2 kilometers, and I couldn't do it. And I was really beating myself up. I was like, you know, why can't I do this? This is only 2 kilometers. It should be nothing. Like, it really should be nothing. And then I reminded myself again, it's like, you're starting from like a starting point. You're at the beginning. You know, you've reset. You're at a position where you've got to start to learn and adapt and overcome again. So bite off only the bits that you can chew. So those small accruing gains that you put in, it's the same with your treatment. It's the same with any aspect or obstacle you're coming at in life. You start to break things down into small little parts, and you start to stack them up and stack them up and stack them up. All of a sudden, you're starting to push on a lot more, and you're starting to kind of take on things that you're not able to do. So I remember the first time trying to do a 15k run, and I was like, this is like really, really difficult. And I finished the 15k run, got back, and ended up having to do work even that evening because I was on call in work, and I worked through, and I was like, how have I done all that? That's unbelievable. Because, you know, when you're even pre-transplant or at your lowest, you're like struggling to go up a flight of stairs. A flight of stairs takes you out for the day.
Does, yeah. You're done. Parked underground and you go too
flight. You're done.
God.
You're done. So it's like, to see now that I'm able to do those things is like, you need to appreciate what your body's capable of doing. So like now running and raising so much money for James is like, my goal was 1,500. So when I applied to do the marathon, I didn't get it with the lottery. And then I went, I'll run it for charity, and I'll run it for the hospital that saved my life and brought me back and gave me a second chance. Now I think we're just shy of 10 grand on the page, which is fantastic. And again, the support system and the people and everyone that's put stuff towards that and helped and done anything, it's unbelievable. It's way beyond anything I ever thought it would be. So now it's like, I'm just getting so driven to wanting to do it. And again, set myself goals. I have a goal time I want to run it in, and it's like, I can't, you know, it's like anything else. You can't set yourself for that, and then if you fail, think it's bad. It's like, failure is a part of life. We're going to fail at a lot of stuff. It's allow yourself to fail, understand why and how you can get better, and just keep growing. Like, you know, I think we always have a lot of fears around failure and what it's going to bring. And it's like, failure is massively important. You should fail.
Do you think any of the training, I know you were saying you wanted to kind of be healthier to your body and stuff.
Yeah.
Is there any of it a reaction to, you get so weak when you're sick? Is any like a resentment to go, I don't want to feel that kind of weak and vulnerable, and by going and doing all this training, I don't feel that way? Or is it just to be healthier?
I want to be healthier, but I understand your question. I think when you think of somebody that's that sick and you see them in that light and so vulnerable, I don't see that as weakness. If someone's vulnerable and really, really low, they are like pushing that heavy stone up the hill. So like, and it's so difficult. That's why when I was talking about the relativity, something that I find to be very easy could be an insurmountable thing for somebody else to overcome. So when you see someone in that space that's really pushing hard at something so small as trying to just exist, it's like there's strength in that. There's so much resilience in that. So when I see all that stuff now, I think to myself, how can I put myself in a position that makes me feel vulnerable but strong?
Mm-hmm.
Because the vulnerability allows us to overcome, become braver, show courage, and adapt and just get better. So I think it's the mixture of just wanting to overcome and be healthy and use my body, give it back some love, because it's ultimately withstood all of this and all the treatment and everything that's happened. It's like, I need to give back to it in some way, shape or form. So
I think that's why your fundraising is doing so well. I think an acknowledgement from what you went through to go and train for something so difficult as a marathon, and then to raise funds for kind of a hospital that helps you so much is probably the perfect combination for why it's doing so well. And I'm sure it'll kind of go beyond what you're hoping to do before the marathon, all going well.
Yeah, I think it's the perfect way to give back as a token of all the work that they've done. Like, I think as well how good they are and the amount of effort they put in, and how personable and friendly and just professional all the people are that work in that hospital, from the doctors to the nurses to the assistants to any form of staff, the porters, anybody. They're all chatting, they're all upbeat, they're all positive. They're just really, really nice and good people. And yeah,
that's what I always say. Like, it never felt doom and gloom in there. It's a calling for them.
Exactly.
How they can deal with people who are that sick all the time and
100%.
Make it feel homely as they can do anyway. They're incredible.
It's an unbelievable skill for a person to have, to be able to, give parts of themselves to help people that are unwell. I don't know how people are able to do that. Like,
it's thankless. I think it's a calling. Job. I think you're called to that type of work.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So then, your marathon is coming up in a few weeks. Training's going well. You set yourself these big goals.
Yeah.
You complete your marathon. How are you going to? You're going to have to set yourself another goal. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to end up setting another goal, and I've had a few kind of different angles of where things are going. So I'll probably see how the marathon goes, make a decision on whether I stay in this space of kind of running. I definitely want to get back into my strength training and kind of push on there as well and see how the body goes. I do want to get into maybe doing some writing or something in the space there of book-wise, what I want to write down and how my experience has changed me as an individual or helped me improve and grow, and how individuation has pushed me towards, becoming the best version of myself, all of that kind of stuff. Just continue to grow, push myself into spaces that I'm not really comfortable with, but try and learn and adapt and become the best version of myself. I don't think there's anything more I can do other than that. There's nothing. Well, there's no ultra marathons on the horizon just yet or anything like that.
Well, I don't think you have to go further than you've done. What you're doing is incredible. But I think it's motivating as well. And I think thanks for sharing, because sometimes it's not easy to share what you went through. But I think it could and will help a lot of people to see, who feel like they're stuck in a position and can't see light at the other side, to see how relatively quickly you've come through that. You've pushed your body to this limit now where you're doing this, you're raising funds, you have a great attitude and stuff. So I think it's a great story for others to hear, and I do think it would help people. And I think that's probably a good place to say thanks very much. And thank you. Best of luck with your marathon and your fundraising.
Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate it.
Totally.